Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Hope you're all doing well. Mikey, Stafford and Rory O'Neill with you now, and we have been joined by Conor Neville of RTÉ.ie and Peter Canavan. How are you getting on, Peter?
Fine, Mikey. Thank you.
Good stuff. You two are grand, I'm sure. I don't really need to ask you here, yeah? Everybody good?
No, we're fine.
Jackie Tyrrell will be along later to continue the Munster versus Leinster argument in hurling, which has replaced previewing league matches that nobody believes the results of. But here we are to preview the football championship, the football league next round of matches. And I think most people would agree the most intriguing match for a couple of reasons is probably the game that's on RTÉ2, happily, on Saturday evening, Kerry versus Armagh. Obviously, Kerry coming off the back of a big beating against Mayo. Armagh having a typically kind of rousing start to their year, even throwing in the recent defeat to unbeatable Roscommon. But I suppose, Peter, what it is mainly for people is probably Kieran Donaghy going home to his hometown as a member of the Armagh backroom team to try and, give Kerry another kick while they're down. You would know him reasonably well from your days together working at Sky. Were you surprised when he went? You surprised by kind of the commitment he's shown, I suppose? Because a lot of people maybe thought his love of basketball, the fact he kind of played the game with a smile on his face. I think a lot of people were kind of surprised when he showed kind of, a desire to go into management. Would it have surprised you?
Well, not at all. It didn't surprise me. A couple of aspects of that, Mikey. First of all, the Kieran McGeeney influence. I don't think he would have went to Armagh willy-nilly. I think Kieran McGeeney did a good job in convincing him maybe that there's serious opportunities, prospects with this young Armagh side, and you have to take that factor into consideration. And plus Kieran's own judgment. I don't think he would have wanted to go anywhere. He had different offers to go to different clubs and counties, I've no doubt. But he decided in Armagh because I think he's seen the potential there himself. And there was an opportunity maybe for him with that setup, for his voice to be heard, for him to implement the type of things that maybe that he can bring to a team. So I think it was a measured decision. Yes, there's a serious commitment there. But, when it comes to commitment, be it basketball or to football, to his own club, he's has given a lot to a lot of different sectors. And I think if you asked any of the Armagh boys, has he bought in to what they're doing, you'll get a definite answer. And you only have to look at some of the, the set plays that have happened this past year or two, from throw-ins, from free kicks, different things. Kieran Donaghy stamps all over it. And I think they're very happy with him. He's getting a kick out of it. And he would certainly relish Armagh going down, getting one over Kerry now at the weekend.
Yeah, it's a stacked backroom team. Obviously, is that how you see his role? He's kind of, is he the attack coach? Kind of, is he the forwards coach? Is that his role, or does he have more of a kind of does he have a more overall view on things than that?
Well, you see him in Kieran's here. I presume he has an overall say in things, but from a training point of view and from speaking to him, he has different ideas and ways of doing things. He's big into his coaching and he's getting a kick out of it. So be it defensive or offensive, you look at his basketball career and aspects of the basketball game that are very relevant to Gaelic. I know he's brought that to them. And it appears in Armagh that there's a bunch of lads there that are taking everything in. And as a team, they're certainly moving in the right direction.
Yeah, Rory, it's kind of phenomenal what he's doing just in terms of hours in the day. I've got a young family, and I have a job, and if I manage one extracurricular activity a week, I think I'm fantastic. He obviously has a job that takes him up and down the country and installing pitches.
We bought a pitch off them.
Oh, very good. Shout out. He plays basketball at a national elite level. he was until recently at least playing for Stacks. I don't know whether he's...
Yeah, which I think is a fair point by Peter, actually, to, the fact that I think he was nearly 40 and still talking out for his club at senior level. I know they got relegated, but...
And he's involved in a senior inter-county management team and a young family. I don't know how he does it. He must have an extra day somewhere.
To be spinning, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But, again, just to go back to the point, I think people are looking at that great Kerry team and saying who will be the future managers. I don't know how many people now, without the gift of hindsight, would have said Kieran Donaghy. He's a guy now I'm going to see going into the inter-county management and coaching kind of down that route.
I'd say probably if you were to talk to the Kieran Donaghy earlier in his career, when he was in his early 20s, you might have felt that. I mean, his book, I think Kieran Donaghy's book, the one he wrote with Kieran Shannon, is right up there with the best GA books that you could read. It's just drips in honesty, sincerity, humor. I've met Kieran a couple of times. Peter's obviously worked with him. He's from my limited interaction with him, he would seem to me to be the kind of fella that would have an infectious personality, and that I'd say he just spreads a sort of a positive, good vibes kind of a feeling around a camp. And that's even before you probably take in, any sort of coaching expertise that he might bring to the table. And if you take the wide range of sports that he's obviously played at different levels, whether it's basketball, GAA, and I know he's very interested in soccer. I think if you then look at the Kieran Donaghy that maybe got towards to the end of his career, it's not all that surprising. I think what's even more admirable is for him to take on that task of going up to Ulster, which I think we would all agree in terms of making people think more. Ulster has really challenged how Gaelic football has been played in terms of they just made you think about the game a little bit more. And I think when Kieran went up there, I think he went up there with that in mind. He's up there to learn from what he can get from that environment as much as he's prepared to impart himself. I would suggest, again, I'm only just guessing, and this is just looking from the outside in. And I think he's a future Kerry manager for certainty.
Jesus, join the queue.
You were saying, Mikey, he played with a smile on his face for Kerry, which he did to an extent. There was also a snarl there.
That's true.
Yeah,
which was very, very useful. I always thought, he stamped that famous game in the Gaelic grounds against Mayo, that sort of anarchic game which went to extra time, and Kerry dug it out somehow against the Mayo team, who seemed to be at their peak or close to their peak. Donaghy really sort of stamped his personality on the game. I always felt, he was introduced. He was on the bench for most of the season, came on late in the drawn game and rescued it, and then essentially was a really dominant, vivid presence in that replay. Although I think David Moran was probably man of the match that day. But yeah, his influence at Armagh. I mean, what struck me last year was how his demeanor on the line in that finish against Galway in the quarter final. He was whooping to the crowd, and it was anyone who was at that game. It was an incredible atmosphere, and he was reveling in it. And there was you could sense his imprint on the way Armagh were approaching that last few minutes, the kind of, bullishness and the way they really went for the throat when Galway started to stutter in injury time. And, he was dragging the crowd into it, and he was whooping on the line. And, you can kind of, he's brought an element of that to Armagh, certainly, and you can see it in the way they play sometimes, although I don't think they win as much as they should, to be honest. But
it'd be an interesting reception he gets on Saturday night. By the way, I wonder will he
Rockies
will be out in force, I'd say.
Peter, that's the other element of it, I suppose, the fact that he's going home to face his home county.
In his backyard.
In his backyard. I think the element of kind of insider knowledge can probably be overplayed. He's a good while out there now. He might have a bit of knowledge of, the club scene or whatever, but I suppose from your own kind of time as Fermanagh manager, and maybe in the odd meeting with Tyrone that there was during that time, there's very little you can glean really. Just because you're a resident in the county, it doesn't mean you've automatically got insider knowledge, does it?
He might have one or two small snippets of information on different players that maybe aren't as well known, but everybody knows about David Clifford and what he can do, trying to stop
No
him.
use knowing about him, really, is it?
But Mikey, in terms of a reception now, I would expect that Kieran get a good reception. Unlike the reception the Cork supporters gives the Dubs down in Park Quay. I think he'll be well received.
There's some very unruly kids down in Parky Queeve, Rory. You need to put manners on them there. They're giving you a bad name.
I don't mind them booing Dubs, generally speaking. That's okay. You know, it was when they were booing Cian Lynch is when
Yeah. On Kerry here, we often say in the hurling, like, you know, Jesus, it's a league defeat doesn't mean a whole lot, you know, yada yada. Football means a little bit more. Not that I think anybody thinks Jack O'Connor, as much as he loved trophies, is going bald-headed for the league this year, but the manner of that defeat to Mayo last week, you know, we know what the Kerry football public are like. It's not unreasonable to say they will be demanding a response on Saturday evening.
I think they will, yeah, absolutely. You're quite right. I think if that went up to Castlebar, produced a good performance, got beat by a point or two, it would have nearly been acceptable. But for Kerry to perform the way and the manner in which they lost that game, I think has taken a few people by surprise. It follows on from the previous year's All-Ireland winners, whereby they really struggled in the National League and were at the different levels, right? I'd say that would concern Jack O'Connor slightly, but look, they still have a lot of big guns to come back in there. They lined out again Mayo, I would say, with what was it happened with 50% of the team that performed against Dublin the year before. So he's a lot of big players to come back in. Aspects that will worry him obviously is the scoring return. I think that 13 shots in the first half against Mayo and only scored 3 times. So unlike Kerry, you've got to question their hunger. They didn't make one block in that first half, and for a Kerry team that prided itself last year and how they had come on defensively and as a unit working really well together. And then you just things that never happened, in recent years. Sean O'Shea missing a 14-meter or 13-meter free kick. So look, they can only go one way, and I think we will get a response. I wouldn't be convinced that they'll beat Armagh, to be honest. I think it's going to be really close. But if again, it depends what team he puts out. If he puts out the strongest team, then you would expect Armagh maybe or Kerry just about to take them.
Yeah, because it like Kerry aren't playing themselves here, Rory, are they? You know, they're playing against an Armagh team who have shown in the last season, the last year or so, that they're a serious outfit.
They're one of the best teams around,
Yeah, and they will be. We bigged up Roscommon here on Monday, obviously, because of the manner of their third come from behind win in a row, pretty much assuring themselves of first top flight football next year, etc. But the flip side of that is, if Jack O'Connor would be disgusted with his first half display, I'd say Geezer would be very disgusted with Armagh's second half display. So a response is due from both sides here, which should make it kind of very interesting.
It'll make it very interesting. I think it'll be really interesting as well to see what the Kerry team is. I know we don't have it now, and that's actually, funnily enough, I was thinking about that, and it's a tangent that we're going down. I think it would really help the GAA, particularly at this time of the year, to try and make a little bit more about, teams. Like a lot of teams are publishing their teams. Cheney, I think Dublin are not even publishing it on the day of the game. And I think if they could get, now look, it's a thorny issue. It's as old as, it's as old as the day is long. You are fighting against the juggernaut that is the Irish team in the Six Nations at the minute. There's an awful lot of other distractions going on in the sporting world. And I think to try and kind of force your way into the news agenda, I know the teams have to be submitted to Croke Park on a Thursday anyway for program purposes. So I don't see any reason why they couldn't at least publish the 26 players that are playing and give people some indication, and then at least allow yourself to get into the news agenda a small bit more. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think from the game on Saturday night, I think it'll be a fabulous game. I like it's going to be I would say it'll be close enough to a full house. You mentioned that the Kerry public are not the most patient of people, and I'd certainly agree with that. And they will definitely need a big response. But yeah, I think Peter's 100% correct that it's not Like this is a really good challenge for them to actually find out now. Can we reverse what happened on Saturday last by going out and winning on Saturday against Armagh? And I think it's a really good test for both teams. Traveling from Armagh, Kerry at home. I think everything is set up for a really good contest, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a cracker.
I feel Armagh need to. We're hearing a lot about Armagh's potential sometimes. I sometimes wonder, is it they need to deliver? Now, it doesn't so much apply to this weekend, but just in the championship overall. Like as a side, I have a acquaintance of mine, friend of mine from Canavan. I don't know if he's without wanting to start a war with Niall McCoy, my colleague, a friend of mine from Canavan. Every time there's some praise of Armagh in the press, he groans and goes, "Oh, more of the loving." He seems to be, he's convinced there's some sort of love-in around Armagh at the moment. And there was a narrative which emerged from last year, I think partly down to the manner of their championship exits, that Armagh were somehow ahead of Derry or had more strings to their bow or a higher ceiling. And I'm not entirely convinced of that. I mean, Armagh's record in the Ulster Championship is very poor. Still very poor. I mean, last year against Donegal was a real letdown. Now, I know they bounced back well in the qualifiers. The manner of their exit to Galway, it was juxtaposed with Derry in the sense that it went to penalties and all the rest. But people seem to misremember the fact that that game was sort of petering out until a very chaotic injury time period where they managed to rescue the game and could have won it, of course, in extra time. But there seemed to be a perception that their ceiling was higher than Derry, or they were somehow ahead of Derry, and I wouldn't be convinced of that at all. No, particularly watching Derry on Saturday. Now, I know they were up against the opposition who were sort of over their head, but Derry looked very honed. And if Derry played Armagh now, I would rank Derry ahead of Armagh based on.
I would too. I think that's fairly almost logical if you take championship above kind of league ranking.
But I find a lot of people seem to rank Armagh higher.
Peter, what do you think of this idea? Armagh as media darlings. I think Armagh are of the opinion that they're the Millwall of the GAA. Everybody hates them and they don't care. I think that's how they like to frame themselves.
They're not in Cavan, they view it differently.
Armagh, they don't like to think of themselves as being liked. I don't think that would suit them.
That's good, because I thought it was just thrown were like that, so that's not too bad.
That's only when you're winning, Peter.
Well, I take Conor's perceptions on Armagh up until last year. I think I would have said that as well, that they weren't capable of backing up two good performances in a row, and that there was more hype to them than substance. But I think that has changed. I think they are a different animal now. I think they do deserve to be up there themselves, and Derry are the best two teams in Ulster at the minute. And the manner of their comebacks, they wouldn't have came back against Mayo in the last 5 minutes this year. I couldn't have seen them doing that before. So I do believe they have a different mentality. There's a much better self-belief, and a number of players have matured and become mainstays in the team. The like of Rian O'Neill, for example, Andy Murnan is really starting to show his potential this year. So I think they have a lot to offer. They have a different ways and different styles of playing the game that not everybody can do. They can change it. They have the personnel to do that. So I'd be looking forward to seeing the progress, yes, in this year's Ulster Championship, and that's the big one for them. I do think they need to win an Ulster Championship as well. And at the minute, I would say, in my opinion, I would place them on them and Derry on an equal footing.
Yeah, a tier below then, Peter, I suppose, are coming in the Ulster ranking would be coming Tyrone, who have a very difficult assignment this weekend. Obviously, going to Mayo. Mayo have 2 home games in a row, which will suit them lovely. They'll have a full house 2 hours before throw-in probably, or the main stand anyway. And it's difficult for Tyrone, 2 away games in a row going down to play, kind of the Connacht powerhouses, because Connacht is the home of Gaelic football, now the top 3 teams in Division 1. So for a team maybe a little bit short on momentum and confidence, the fixtures haven't been too kind to Tyrone, have they?
And to the west is not doing us a pile of good up there, to be honest. But It's funny. It's one place that in recent years Tyrone have performed very well. It's been McHale Park. So I'm looking forward to going down from the point of view. There's always a great atmosphere down there, and they're very passionate about their football. And I think this will open up to be a good game of football. From a Tyrone perspective, Brian and Fergal have various aspects of their play that they will be disappointed with. What do they look at first? Do they look at how porous their defence were in both halves against Roscommon, definitely against Galway, where they were able to penetrate them so easily to get scores in the second half again, the breeze? Do they look at how we're coughing up so many scoring chances with 30 opportunities to score against Galway? I think our scoring conversion was 43%, coughed up goal chances. Or does he look at the manner in which, when we're playing again the breeze, how the team seems to revert to containment rather than going at teams and hurting them? So look, there's various parts of Tyrone's play that certainly can be improved and will be a concern for management. And they come up against a team now who's playing really well, probably playing, as well as they have in 2 or 3 years. There's a confidence about them. They're trying out different things, and they're managing to do this without 2 or 3 of their so-called better players. So it's a massive assignment for Tyrone, and if we can get out of Castlebar with a point, I think it would be an achievement.
Yeah, that's an interesting point Peter makes there, and Rory, about the kind of slipping back to reverting to containment, because obviously 2 years ago Tyrone won in All Ireland, that was exactly like they were breaking a pace, and they were really they were aggressive, they were on the front foot, and that's kind of what did for this weekend's opponents in All Ireland final. So it's funny to kind of see, I know there's been a bit of change and a few kind of key players lost, but not too many. Same management team. It's kind of odd to see this regression, might be the wrong word, but kind of almost like a retreat to a different style of play.
Yeah, but I suppose I wouldn't underestimate the loss of Conor McKenna. I think
he's the obvious big one.
I think he played a very, very significant role in them winning the All Ireland, obviously, and just that out ball he gave them, and the fact that he could give them the opportunity to move, to play that counter-attacking game and move them back to front very, very quickly. He's a similar type of player insofar as he would have been sort of the Conor O'Callaghan for Tyrone, in that, you can kind of kick it in ugly and he'll probably still win it. And, he had a huge role, obviously, in the semi-final victory over Kerry. But yeah, I know Sean mentioned on League Sunday, he was extremely worried, and I was kind of going first round of the league, I wouldn't be kind of, exactly getting too fretful at this point. And then obviously they win the following week, but you've got to probably caveat that by saying, where are Donegal? And then obviously the loss last week. Now, again, 16-13 in June. Would I be pushing any panic buttons? No. The problem for them is it just doesn't get any easier. To have to go down to a rampant Mayo and Castlebar where their tails are up. It'll be it's going to test them. I think we're going to see what Tyrone are made of. And if they get beaten comfortably again, then maybe the alarm bells do have to start ringing.
Yeah, a word on Mayo, Conor. Everyone, the GAA's favorite soap opera. Kevin McStay went in, new lead character. Weren't sure how it was going to go. I think people are kind of happy with how it's going thus far, and with the discovery of players. I think Lee Keegan has rebuffed Rory's advances and won't be returning.
I still wouldn't be so sure about that.
He's not giving up. Jesus, you won't take the message. You'll get done for stalking, Rory. So Conor, just your early impressions on Mayo. You've watched them a lot, written about them a lot. What do you think of Kevin McStay's Mayo?
Yeah, I mean, we were expecting a kind of a awkward transitional year for Mayo, losing a couple of their best players from recent years. I mean, the most striking thing for me is in the aftermath of the 2021 All Ireland final, there was a lot of bad feeling among the Mayo fans around Croke Park when you were coming out, and the wistful kind of pride that they sometimes felt after losing narrowly to Dublin wasn't there. And one of the big consensus opinion to emerge, I thought, was that Aidan O'Shea's days as a full forward, that notion had been, dispatched for all time. He wasn't a full forward. So it's very strange to see Kevin McStay come in and Aidan O'Shea suddenly reborn as a full forward and suddenly a very potent weapon for Mayo. Lee made the point in the column last week that his rebirth in that role is very much conditioned by Mayo's slight change in their attacking approach, whereby they're no longer, absolutely devoted to the running game, which they appeared to be in that final against Tyrone. And there's a lot more early kicking going on, and he's feeding off that, and he's laying off the ball, he's winning ball, he's drawing defenders, and he's slipping passes off to the Ryan O'Donoghue and so forth. And the thing about Mayo is, I mean, it's such a deep Gaelic football culture that you think they're going to be in transition. I mean, we thought that after the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final, when they were finally properly hammered by Dublin, which hadn't happened before. And yet the following year, they're back again. They're back in the next two All-Ireland finals, as relevant as ever. They always seem to find players. There's a steady stream of players always coming through because, it's such a fevered culture. So they have David McBrien coming through now, and Bob Toohey and lads. And, it's remarkable consistency to them, and they never seem to. There have been very few lulls in the Mayo story since 1989. They've just been a constant presence, almost, with the exception possibly of the late noughties. But they're back again. They're relevant as ever. I'm not sure I'd be calling Lee back urgently and saying just to get his medal in time, because we're very early days. I mean, I'm not sure how relevant Kerry's form is at the moment, because they were laid back, obviously. And
Dublin can't be judged very well because they're playing in Division 2.
We saw how misleading the league was for Dublin last year. We know the kind of off-season Kerry would have had. So, I'm not sure how relevant it's going to be come the championship, other than to say Mayo are clearly in fine fettle, and there's a good mood out there, and morale seems to be high again.
Yeah, we won't try and preview all games by any means this weekend, lads, because we've kind of had a good focus on two. Just you mentioned it briefly a few minutes ago, Peter. Just Galway are travelling to Donegal, who, as we know, never lose in Ballybuffet, as Niall McCoy said here on Monday, but never win in Letterkenny. So not going through the best of times, having lost their captain for an as yet unknown period of time, to be welcoming Galway to Letterkenny rather than Ballybuffet. They could really use 2 points, and an encouraging first win. But I think now we're kind of seeing kind of the Donegal season that maybe some of us kind of suspected we might see a blip. Or do you think they have the players? They've got a lot of players coming back, so do you think they can, even without McBrearty, they can turn it around?
They certainly have quality players, Mikey, but whether they have the players of the leadership to turn it around, I'm not convinced. And yet you look at Galway, and the Donegal supporters are saying, well, we don't have Murphy, we don't have McHugh, we don't have McBrearty. But Galway didn't, last week against Rome, didn't have Comer Finnerty or Shane Watts, 3 of their best players, yet they have been performing very well. So it's a massive game for Donegal. I was impressed by Galway and last Sunday, and that the game was going away from them, and by all intents and purposes, with a gale force breeze thrown on top, it would have been easy to go through the motions and suffer at the feet, but they didn't accept that. And you talk about players standing up, and I thought Matty Tierney did that brilliantly when they needed leadership. He was there for them. He won ball in the middle of the pitch. He drove them forward, and he got scores as well. So it's a big ask. It's a big ask from Donegal. They desperately need the points. But it'll be a surprise to me if Galway don't turn them over once again on Sunday.
Yeah, and then you're really looking at kind of they're looking down rather than up. And I suppose even with 3 games to play,
half 12 throw-in, which is unusual.
It is. It's on TG Cahir, so I guess they're trying to squeeze in as many games as possible. We'll finish up now in a minute, but seeing as we have you on, Conor, mentioned on Monday that Waterford have no points at Division 4, kind of expected. Limerick have no points about Division 2. not to be altogether unexpected. But for both Tipperary and Longford to be pointless at the bottom of Division 3 is probably not what anybody would have predicted, I think, at the start of the year. And they're playing each other in a relegation 4-pointer in Pearse Park on Sunday. Are you hopeful?
No, I'm not. No. Well, the O'Byrne Cup has won this year, so the silverware, it's already a glorious year as far as I'm concerned. No, it's been a horrific start to the league for Longford. They have scored in 3 games. They've scored 28 points across 3 games and conceded 550, which is pretty bad. Particularly against Westmeath, they were 8-4 up coming up to half time and proceeded to lose the rest of the game 4-12 to a point. Oof. Now, that was slightly exacerbated by having 2 men sent off very late in the game. So the wheels came off properly right at the end, which may have added to that. They're taking on a Tip team who aren't in great health themselves and have a lot of injuries. So there's a chance with home advantage they could sneak a win, but you suspect, based on the form lines in Division 3, that whoever wins it may be their only win. Longford have been in Division 3, I believe, since since they got promoted in 2015. So they've had a lengthy enough spell in Division 3. Should have got promoted a few years ago, only for Sean Quigley, I think, to score points in injury time to deny them. At least change of scenery next year.
Join us in Division 4 is lovely. Thank you, lads. There's obviously 16 games on, but we can't cover them all, and I think we gave a good look at a couple of them there. So Peter, thank you very much, and we'll chat to you again soon, and we'll be back in a minute with Jackie Tyrrell to sort of look ahead to the hurling weekend. Good luck.
Cheers, lads.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Welcome back. We've been joined by Jackie Tyrrell to talk about hurling. How are you doing, Jackie?
I'm good. How are you, Mikey?
Good, thank you. Good. The games this weekend, God bless them, are a little scratchy. But we will get on to Limerick v Galway and Wexford v Clare later, because they're kind of the 2 juicy enough ones, and they are Munster versus Leinster clashes. And Munster v Leinster has been dominating on a quiet hurling week somewhat. Rory started it last week with his declaration that the 5 best teams in the country are probably the teams in the Munster Championship. Shane McGrath backed him up. I asked Shane McGrath to write a column about how Kerry being allowed to join the Munster Championship should they win Joe McDonagh is good for the development of hurling, and I said it's about time you Munster lads carried your fair share of the load for development. And he did write that, but also added in a dig that at least 4 of the top 5 teams in the country are based in Munster, which got up the hackles of our friend Colin Parkinson, whose podcast
only 4.
and Brian Carroll may have suggested that his RTÉ Radio compadre Shane McGrath must have been smoking something to say that. So Jackie, we've got a good old Leinster versus Munster showdown here, and obviously you're gonna cut Rory and Shane McGrath off at the knees there.
Well, what I'd say first, Mikey, on it is that there definitely is a slighter imbalance on the 2 round robins. Leinster is, with all due respect to everyone in it, it is slightly easier because there are weeks when games aren't as competitive and as cutthroat as the Munster Championship. So I will admit that. To Shane's comments, look, there is some merit in some of them, but I suppose if you only look back to kind of the acid test, which is kind of the All-Ireland semi-finals last year, you go, yeah, and Limerick are the market leaders, and probably by a bit of a stretch at this minute. You look then, who are the chasing pack? If you look last year, there was Clare, Kilkenny and Galway, 2 being Leinster. So I suppose just in Leinster, Kilkenny and Galway are probably a little ahead of the rest of them. I know it's still early, but if you're looking back to look forward as well, I think you have to include Kilkenny and Galway. I think Shane excluded Kilkenny, and maybe that's the transition of the Brian Cody into Derek Ling thing. So I suppose to his comments, I don't agree with him. I see the merit of him, but there'll always be this healthy banter between Leinster and Munster. It's just the nature of it. When you've only kind of 2 round robins on it, there's obviously a big focus on both of them. I'd like to think that Leinster is a more more diverse and a more challenging championship versus the Munster one. And it goes into all this stuff. And me and Dale will always have this Barney about the colleges championship, where in Munster it's all about the Harty this, Harty that. There was 10,000 here, there was 2,000 there. And I said to Dale, you do realise after the Harty, the hurling only starts then, and you have the All-Ireland series where Kieran's generally dominate, and you're wrapped up in the whole Harty world and still stuck in
but Jackie, Kieran's is the Kilkenny minor team.
Oh, it is, yeah, I know it is, but like the Harty, there's this mystique about the Harty as if it's the Champions League. It's a Munster final. There's a Leinster final. Like there's a Connacht, there's an Ulster, like there's an All-Ireland still to be won, and it's almost like they win it and they just celebrate that's it. And it thickens my gut, and I get on to Dale about it all the time. And
I know.
I'm sure this Munster psyche that they just think the world revolves around.
They're giants among men. Look, I'll go to the Longford man who supports Galway next in Conor. Conor, yeah, I'm you know, I want to back you up here, but I have to obviously play devil's advocate. Outside of beating Kerry in the provisional quarter-final last year, Wexford in 7 matches have to go back to 2016 since the last time they bet a Munster team in Championship. They'll beat Clare on Sunday, and then they'll lose to Clare in an All-Ireland quarter-final, because that's what they do in the last couple of years. Kilkenny, Clare are the only one of the top of the Munster teams not to beat Kilkenny in Championship since Kilkenny's last All-Ireland in 2015. Munster have won the last 5 All-Irelands. That hasn't happened in the last 6 decades. And they've won 10 of the last 11 under-20/under-21 titles. So, unfortunately, Kilkenny and Galway can have their day. And I think the 4 out of 5 argument is Shane possibly trying to raise a few hackles. It's pushing it. But, like, undoubtedly, Shane might be almost weakening his argument by going that far. There's no doubt that Munster is the stronger province at present.
Munster's in the ascendancy largely due to Limerick. I mean, you say Munster have won the last 5. I mean, one team has won 4 though, so they're well ahead. And we saw last year's All-Ireland semi-final was very sobering. I mean, it's really softened the cough of the Munster triumphalist brigade, really, that Kilkenny-Clare semi-final. It went very quiet for a while. I am struck by the extent of the division between the two provinces. I always wonder, was it always this keen? Because the last time Limerick lost in the All-Ireland semi-final, I'm struck by a conversation. I was talking to a chap from Carlow later on that evening, and I didn't know there was this keen provincial rivalry that had developed, but he was absolutely reveling in the fact that Limerick had been beaten by Kilkenny. And you'd think Kilkenny is kind of the oppressors in Leinster, would be disliked by the rest of Leinster. It's not the case.
It's called Stockholm syndrome.
There's a degree of that. Kilkenny's dominance is sort of accepted in Leinster, and people
we're whipped curs.
Yeah, they're almost willing to get behind them at All-Ireland level. And I think because the Munster Hurling Championship has so much romance and mystique and aura attached to it that it kind of.
The last 3 or 4 Munster championships haven't been very good, though. There've been a lot of one-sided games, bar last year's final. Take that out of it.
I know, but in terms of perception, it has that. And I think, particularly at the start of the round robin, when there seemed to be great Munster games every week, and Leinster was sort of seen almost in danger of becoming an afterthought, I think there was an element of resentment which grew up within Leinster. Which I was very struck by how the delight when Kilkenny overturned Limerick that day. And there was, we were talking about the Munster-Leinster divide then ahead of that 2019 All-Ireland final, which could have gone either way up until the sending off. But certainly at the moment, Munster is massively in the ascendant. I don't know if they're the top 4 or the top 5. They certainly don't have 5 of the top 5. I mean,
who are the top 4 to 4 at Shane News, Mikey?
Oh, he didn't name them. No. He's too clever for that. Rory, who are the top 4? Rank the 5 Munster teams, Rory. Limerick are top.
Limerick would be a good bit out in front. I do think, and this isn't parochial, I think Cork are coming. And I think Tipperary are absolutely on the right road back. And going on what we saw from Clare last year, despite the injuries they suffered and the absentees and the depth that they've put into their panel, I'd expect a big show from them as well. Waterford really are the ones that you just can't really put your finger on, because obviously they won the league last year and were fantastic, and for some reason blew up in the championship, and they have a dreadful record in the round robin. So I suppose there's the four of those, but then you throw Waterford into the mix and you just don't know what could happen.
Davies' first year.
Yeah, normally he gets a bounce, doesn't he? So, yeah, I don't think it's that outlandish from Shane to suggest that. And obviously, look,
you wouldn't. You said the top five teams.
I went a little bit further, right? Now, the one thing I'll say, there's a few things. Look, the reality is Munster has dominated the hurling championship for Barrack. You take Kilkenny out of it, and I think, let's say there's 140 All Irelands. I think like Kilkenny have won 37 or whatever it might be, 36, or I think Munster have over 100. So they're just the facts. And that goes from minor all the way up to senior and probably across club as well. And then you throw into the mix, I think, a big part. And I know people might say, look, Clare flopped. I do think there is an element of Munster just being that little bit more. You just have to put it on the line a little bit more in Munster now to try and get out of the province. Whereas, like, you can have your little down weeks in the Leinster Championship because you've got your Westmeads, your Laois, and your Antrams in there. Obviously, Laois not this year, but it's easy. It is easier to make it into that three to get out, and I think that certainly adds a freshness, which I think might have had something to do with the flat display that Clare gave in that All-Ireland semi-final. So you'd have to cut them a small pass on that front. But look, I suppose, yeah, it's a good argument and it's a good discussion. It's a good debate. And there is an element of snobbery around it, I suppose, really, because Munster hurling.
An element?
Yeah.
Go on, Jackie, expand on that, because like your playing career was probably, was not dominated by, but was defined somewhat by your rivalry with probably Tipperary more than any other team, yeah. And that was probably just like Tipperary Kilkenny has nothing to do with Munster and Leinster. You're just like rival, you're just neighbours who fucking hate each other. But like the Munster snobbery thing, is that something that would have ever like crossed your mind or been discussed when you were still playing?
Not really, because I suppose traditionally the Munster Championship, you think you'll go back to when it was just knockout on a first round of Limerick and Tip or Cork and Tip. It used to be cutthroat stuff, but I suppose you look back at the championship last year and if we probably guilty of kind of looking in the Munster Championship and expecting all of the teams every week to be really, really good and really competitive. But if you think of last year, there was some soft touches in the Munster Championship around last year. You think of Waterford's limp performance down in Clare last year. You think of Waterford's, their performance against Cork in Walsh Park. How poor Tip were last year. There was some probably down weeks there that weren't expected for teams that played against them. And although Antrim and Laois and the Westmeads of this world, like you see what's Wexford, having to Wexford end up to Westmeads, you know how hard it is when you play Antrim. Like, so I suppose it's probably looking in at it, you kind of just have this overall view and sense that Munster is more competitive in Leinster. But when you actually break it down, it's actually not, the gap isn't as big as probably people perceive.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're pushed for time for hurling this week, lads, so we'll push on and have a quick look at a couple of the games. Conor, starting off, your beloved Galway are hosting Limerick. The last couple of years we've probably looked at, we've kind of thought that this was kind of some kind of a precursor of a bigger championship kind of battle to come, and the early rounds wouldn't dissuade you from thinking that again, that like at least physically people look at Galway and say, yeah, they're the team best matched to play Limerick. But as we've discussed here a couple of times, I don't think we've seen anything like the strongest Galway yet because of their massive Fitzgibbon commitments and the fact that Henry Shefflin has been trying out as many players as possible. So do you think this will be the day Fitzgibbon's over a week? Might we see something close to the strongest Galway side, or do you think Shefflin's too cute to play his strongest hand against his main rival?
I don't know, will he be minded to do that? I mean, they did put in a strong performance in the Gaelic rounds last year and won well. I think Fintan Burke was man of the match, so they seemed to target it last year, albeit that was thrown into relief by Limerick's displays generally.
Limerick losing to everybody except...
so that was thrown into
awfully.
Context. Yeah, I thought they were pretty impressive now against Wexford. I mean, they were fairly sluggish in the first half and they didn't appear to be tuned in, and Wexford's kind of incredible wastefulness in front of goal left them in it, and then they just sort of put on a spurt for a while and killed the game. And particularly, I thought they were very impressive, particularly Garage McInerney at full back was very good that day, and Whelan again was good. So, you know, he's trying to find new players. I mean, you would like to see more from the newer crop to emerge. I mean, Evan Nyland, after a couple of wobbles on the frees against Wexford, was unerring afterwards, but you'd like to see more from him in general play. Jarlath Mannion was taken off at half-time that day. Donald O'Shea scored an early point, didn't really influence it much afterwards. So, you know, it's the general problem in Galway that they're still kind of going back to the sort of the 2017 crop, and they will still be the linchpin of the team. Now they have added a couple of players since then. Jack Grealish and Darren Morrissey are very good at corner back, and Concannon, who wasn't actually around in 17, he came on in the second half against Wexford and was really good. You know, he really sparked a kind of fizz about the team. Losing to Cork, I mean, I don't know they had a semi-experimental team against Cork, so you'd have to put that in context. I know Cork don't require much evidence to conclude that greatness is at hand. Rory is, you know, they've lost 5 championship games in a row to Galway, but apparently that doesn't count for much.
You don't need to scratch the surface too deep.
Quit living in the past, Conor. Quit living in the past.
Yeah. Well, last year, I would say, Limerick seemed to be more clued in for the league last year. I mean, they wrote it off entirely the last couple of years, and that did it more than anything to damage the gravitas and the perception of the league. So they're playing Galway this week. They look pretty good against Clare. It'll be an interesting game, but again, with the league, you don't quite know what you're looking at or what it means down the line, because Galway won last year.
Yeah,
a whole pile of impact later on in the year, although the semi-final was very tight.
Yeah, Jackie, I do notice like John Kiely does seem to have a kind of a steely kind of air about him this year. And partly it's because he's stonewalling all questions about Aaron Gillan, so he has to be kind of a bit menacing in press conferences or in interviews. But I don't know, like he seems to mix things up every year. It's not like he says, well, we did this last year, so that's going to work this year. Like he's clearly thinking differently about the league than he was last year. And for me, that just makes this game kind of quite exciting, because Limerick probably did try quite hard last year against Galway. I think they tried quite hard in all their games, but clearly there was training and kind of conditioning elements in there as well. This year they seem a little bit different to me. How about you?
Yeah, I suppose it is. And like, if you look at the 2 games he's had, the first game against Cork, a really good first half, a poor second half. The game against Clare was a non-contest. So he hasn't really got a really good read of where the team are. He won't be anyway concerned. And without being dismissive to Limerick, there's not much to see here. They're an animal. They're going to be an animal. They're going in the right direction. They seem a little more ahead of the advance of where they are last year. The only interesting thing from the point of view of the weekend is where Mike Houlihan is in relation to this team. Could he push hard for a starting spot? Adam English, after the Fitzgibbon campaign, who had a good second half against Clare, where are they at in their trend as regards pushing these guys? Colm Coughlin, of those 3, how close are any of these lads to pressing any of those mainstay, those pillars of that team and putting the pressure on? So that's kind of the Limerick side of it, really. I think Galway is the fascinating thing. If I'm Henry and I'm getting a read on Henry, I think there'll be a couple of things he'll be looking for this weekend. This will be one of the acid tests that he will have looked throughout the league and put a ring around this, right? They've had a decent record against Limerick in the league. He'll be looking for a couple of things. One, we shipped 4 goals against Cork and Salt Hill. That doesn't happen the weekend. He wants a really good performance from his defence. And if I'm Henry, I'm going to overload on the side of new guys. We know what Garrod Mack can do. We know what David Burke, Donaghy Burke, even Conor Whelan, the Manions, we know what these guys. What can Kevin Cooney do? What can Martin McManus do? What can Evan Nyland do outside of frees? Great if he scores 9 or 10 from frees, but is he working hard? Is he putting pressure on? Is he winning hard ball? Is he getting points from play? So that's what he really needs to learn the weekend. Him winning the weekend, it's not the be all and end all. He'll be looking for a really good, strong defensive performance. And who of these 4 or 5 cohort of lads that have been putting their hands up who looks to be the front runners that I can look at seriously for my 15 come championship time. And that will be the big focus from Henry this weekend.
And Mikey, this like in boxing parlance, and I've used this before in relation to Galway and Limerick in particular, like in terms of styles make fights, they nearly always deliver, you know, absolute crackers. You know, it's just there's something about the way the two teams seem to match up. And I don't know whether it's because of the physical stuff, whether they're both well able to get stuck in on that side of it. You know, obviously there's an awful lot of linkage there between lads going to college in Limerick and lads going to college in Galway, and they're quite close geographically. So, yeah, I think it's going to be, you know, it's the hurling game of the weekend. Can't wait for it.
The other one I'll just mention, just briefly, last 2 years, Wexford have beaten Clare in the league and then not beaten them in the championship. Let's not go any further into it than that. So we're all agreeing Wexford are going to win on Sunday. Yeah, they're going to beat Clare. Yeah,
a blow. They'll strike a blow for the Leinster flag.
They absolutely will. And let's not rule out Dublin given early kind of best boys in class Tipperary a bit of a fright either, because I think, you know, I think Dublin, I think it's possible. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. But we are really out of time, so we'll talk about these games on Monday. And you can follow all the action on Saturday and Sunday sport, of course, on RTÉ Radio 1. We'll have reports and live blogs on the RTÉ
Come on, Leinster.
Come on, Leinster. And we have a football match on the telly on Saturday evening. It is, refresh my memory, somebody.
Kerry Armagh, the big
Kerry
one from
Armagh,
Tralee.
of course we are. Yes, as we discussed earlier with Peter. Okay, that's at 5 p.m. And so look, we'll chat to you on Monday. Thank you much, Rory, Conor, and Jackie, and Peter earlier. And we'll catch you soon. Goodbye.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.